Hamðismál, the Ballad of Hamther. The Hamðismál, the concluding poem in the Codex Regius, is on the whole the worst preserved of all the poems in the collection. The origin of the story, the relation of the Hamðismál to the Guðrúnarhvöt, and of both poems to the hypothetical Old Hamðismál, are outlined in the introductory note to the Guðrúnarhvöt. The Hamðismál as we have it is certainly not the old poem of that name. Indeed, it is so pronounced a patchwork that it can hardly be regarded as a coherent poem at all. Some of the stanzas are in Fornisolog, some are in Marahatr, one, stanza 29, appears to be in Lotahatr, and in many cases the words can be adapted to any known metrical form only by liberal emendation. That any one should have deliberately composed such a poem seems quite incredible, and it is far more likely that some 11th century narrator constructed a poem about the death of Hamther and Sorli by piecing together various fragments and possibly adding a number of Malahatr stanzas of his own. It has been argued, and with apparently sound logic, that our extant Hamðismál originated in Greenland, along with the Altamahl. In any case, it can hardly have been put together before the latter part of the 11th century, although the old Hamðismál undoubtedly long antedates this period. Many editors have attempted to pick out the parts of the extant poem which were borrowed from this older lay, but the condition of the text is such that it is by no means clear even what stanzas are in Fornisolog and what in Malahatr. Many editors likewise indicate gaps and omissions, but it seems doubtful whether the extant Hamðismál ever had a really consecutive quality, its component fragments having apparently been strung together with little regard for continuity. The notes indicate some of the more important editorial suggestions, but make no attempt to cover all of them, and the metrical form of the translation is often based on mere guesswork as to the character of the original lines and stanzas. Despite the chaotic state of the text, however, the underlying narrative is reasonably clear, and the story can be followed with no great difficulty. Hamðismál. Great the evils once that grew with the dawning sad of the sorrow of elves. In early morn awake for men, the evils that grief to each shall bring. Not now nor yet of yesterday was it, long the time that since hath lapsed, so that little there is that is half as old, since Gudrun, daughter of Gjuki, wedded her son so young to Svanhild's vengeance. The sister he had was Svanhild called, and her did Ermaneric trample with horses, white and black on the battle way, grey road wanted the steeds of the Goths. Little the kings of the folk are ye like, for now ye are living alone of my race. Lonely am I as the forest aspen, of kindred bare as the fir of its boughs. My joys are all lost as the leaves of the tree, with the scather of twigs from the warm day turns. Then Hamther spoke forth, the high of heart. Small praise didst thou, Gudrun, to Hogni's deed give, when they wakened thy Sigurd from out of his sleep, thou didst sit on the bed while the slayers laughed. Thy bed covers white, with blood were red, from his wounds and with gore of thy husband were wet. Thou wast striken atly by the slaying of Erp, and the killing of Eitel, thine own grief was worse. So should each one wield the wound-biting sword, that another it slays, but smites not itself. Then did Sorli speak, for wise was he ever. With my mother I never a quarrel will make, For little in speaking methinks ye both lack. What hast thou, Gudrun, that will give thee no tears? For thy brothers dost weep, and thy boys so sweet, thy kinsmen in birth on the battlefield slain. Now Gudrun as, while for us both shalt thou weep, we sit doomed on our steeds, and far hence shall we die. Then the famed glad one, on the steps she was, slender-fingered, spake with her sons. Ye shall danger have, if counsel ye heed not. By 2 heroes alone shall 200 of Goths be bound or be slain in a lofty walled burg. From the courtyard they fared, in fury they breathed. The youth swiftly went o'er the mountains wet, on their Hunnish steeds death's vengeance to have. On the way they found a man so wise. What help from the weakling, Brown, may we have? So answered them their half-brother then. So well may I, my kinsman, aid, as help one foot from the other has. How may a foot its fellow aid, on a flesh-grown hand another help? Then Erp spake forth, his words were few, as haughty he sat on his horse's back. To the timid 'tis ill, the way to tell, a bastard they the bold one called. From their sheaths they drew their shining swords, their blades to the giantess joy to give. By a third they lessened the might that was theirs, the fighter young to earth they felled. Their cloaks they shook, their swords they sheathed, the high-born men wrapped their mantles close. On the roads they fared, in an ill way found, and their sister's son on a tree they saw, on the wind-cold wolf tree west of the hall, and crane's bait crawled. None would care to linger. In the hall was din. The men drank deep on the horses' hoofs, could no one hear, till the warrior hardy sounded his horn. Men came, and the tale to Ermaneric told, how warriors helmed without they beheld. Take counsel wise, for brave ones are come, of mighty men thou the sister didst murder. Then Ermaneric laughed, his hand laid on his beard, his arms, for with wine he was warlike, he called for. He shook his brown locks, on his white shield he looked, and raised high the cup of gold in his hand. Ha! Happy, methinks, were I to behold Hamther and sorely, here in my hall. The men would I bind with strings of bows, and Yuki's heirs on the gallows hang. In the hall was clamour, the cups were shattered, men stood in blood from the breast of the Goths. Then did Hamther speak forth, the haughty of heart. Thou soughtest Ermaneric, us to see, sons of one mother seeking thy dwelling. Thou seest thy hands, thy feet thou beholdest, Ermaneric flung in the fire so hot. Then roared the king of the race of the gods, bold in his armor, as roars a bear. Stone, ye the men that steel will not bite, sword no spear, the sons of Yonok. Sorely spake. Ill didst win, brother, when the bag thou didst open. Off from the bag came baleful counsel. Heart hast thou, Hamther, if knowledge thou hast. A man without wisdom is lacking in much. Hamther spake. His head was now off, if Erp was living. The brother so keen whom we killed on the road. The warrior noble, 'twas the Norns that drove me. The hero to slay, when in fight, should be holy. In fashion of wolves, it befits us not. Amongst ourselves to strive, like the hounds of the Norns, that nourished were in the greed mid wastes so grim. We have greatly fought o'er the goss do we stand, by our blades laid low, like eagles on branches. Great our fame, though we die today or tomorrow. None outlives the night when the Norris have spoken. Then sorely beside the gable sank, and Hamther fell at the back of the house. This is called the Old Ballad of Hamther.